Hi class, this is Pei Zhang. We're going to be covering our fifth presentation, and the title is Crafting the Target Text. We're going to leave macro elements in order to focus on micro elements and deal with more local aspects of text production, such as linking, titling, paragraphing, emphasizing and hedging, and wording. By crafting, we mean the way in which writers and translators put together the various pieces of text, linking ideas through sentences and paragraphs within an overall structure. Imagine yourself translating the following paragraph. 2 canine cadavers with orthopedic abnormalities were identified, which included a first dog that had an unusual deformity secondary to premature closure of the distal ulnar physis, and a second dog that had a hypertrophic non-union of the femur, and the radius and femur of both dogs were harvested and cleaned of soft tissue. You decide to render it in your mother tongue following the same syntactic pattern, that is, all in one sentence. As a result, you've got the factual content in your target text, but you may not be satisfied with the excessive length of the sentence and decided to split it up into several sentences. This could be a gloss of your target text. 2 canine cadavers with orthopedic abnormalities were identified, period. The first dog had an unusual deformity, period. It was secondary to premature closure of the distal ulnar physis, period. The second dog had a hypertrophic non-union of the femur, period. The radius and femur of both dogs were harvested, period. They were cleaned of soft tissue, period. Now you have probably gone too far. The sentences are too short and the whole paragraph sounds very fragmented and abrupt. You need to recraft it so that the target text reads more smoothly and your reader feels more comfortable. Maybe something like this. 2 canine cadavers with orthopedic abnormalities were identified. The first dog had an unusual deformity secondary to premature closure of the distal ulnar physis. The second, a hypertrophic non-union of the femur. The radius and femur of both dogs were harvested and cleaned of soft tissue. This third redrafting not only reads better, but also is slightly shorter than the previous ones. Although the order of presentation of the information has not been altered, it has been reconnected in a different way by means of changes at sentence level, which affect punctuation and cohesion. Paragraphing. Imagine you were faced with a long text in which there were no paragraphs. How would you feel? Why would a text with paragraphs be preferable? What, then, does paragraphing do? Well, of course, it helps us to navigate the text by breaking it down into more manageable chunks. The beginning of paragraphs usually link logically with the previous paragraphs, while their ends move us along, preparing us for the ideas to come. These links act as signposts for readers and save them mental effort. So, as we draft the target text, we should pay attention to 3 key aspects. First, position of paragraph within the whole section or text. Second, links with the paragraph before and the paragraph after. And third, internal order of the paragraph. Linking. Once paragraphs are well connected with one another and ordered internally, flow within the paragraph is a key element for successful communication. In the following example, we have deleted 4 linking words or phrases. Systematic errors in the data on suicide or antidepressants may have biased the results. Suicides, blank, are underreported, and there are likely to be errors in using general practice prescription profiles to estimate sex and age differences in use from sales data. It is unlikely, blank, that underreporting of suicide should have changed over time, or that such underreporting or any errors in the general practice survey data would both vary by age and sex in the ways required to explain the patterns in our data. Trends in risk factors for suicide, blank, unemployment and per capita alcohol consumption may explain the decline in suicide. Per capita alcohol consumption shows a substantial decline in the early 1990s in Australia, blank, It remained steady throughout the remainder of the 1990s. Try to fill in the blanks with your common sense and knowledge. So it is important for you to have a rich and varied repertoire of linking words and phrases in your mother tongue to express a variety of functions. Back referencing. When crafting the target text, it is important to link its parts so that it moves on in a coherent way. Have a look at the examples below and compare the edited original and the possible gloss of the translation. Edited original. This notion opened the way for connecting the fabric of social and cultural phenomena to specific features of neurobiology, which is supported by powerful facts. The gloss version. This notion opened the way for connecting the fabric of social and cultural phenomena to specific features of neurobiology, a connection supported by powerful facts. Here, connecting is changed into connection. And the second example, the edited original is, suicides, for example, are underreported, and there are likely to be errors in using general practice prescription profiles to estimate sex and age differences in use from sales data. It is unlikely, however, that it should have changed over time, or it would both vary by age and sex in the ways required to explain the patterns in our data. The gloss version. Suicides, for example, are underreported, and there are likely to be errors in using general practice prescription profiles to estimate sex and age differences in use from sales data. It is unlikely, however, that underreporting of suicide should have changed over time, or that such underreporting would both vary by age and sex in the ways required to explain the patterns in our data. Here, suicides are underreported is changed into underreporting of suicide. In these two examples, back reference has been reinforced in the target text by means of nominalizations. Connecting becomes connection, and suicides are underreported becomes underreporting of suicide, thus reinforcing coherence, clarity, readability, and smoothness. Note that in the edited original on 2 occasions, the word it is inadequate, as it is not clear what it refers to. In the gloss, this problem has been resolved. There are other ways of referring back unambiguously to something already mentioned. Repetition of a word, replacing a noun with a pronoun, using a synonym or paraphrase, using an antonym, using a comparison, or using an adverbial reference. Emphasizing and hedging. Let's focus now on one of the most important pragmatic aspects when crafting the target text. By hedging, we mean the fact that a statement is not presented categorically, thus reducing the writer's commitment to the truth of the propositions. Both emphasizing and hedging have to do with the attitude and point of view of the writer. Notice them in the following examples. First one, remember, this medicine is for you. Only a doctor can prescribe it for you. Never give this medicine to anyone else. Second example, the needle must be inserted in an intercostal space overlying the fluid. Third example, but placebos may also have adverse effects, including nausea, dizziness, sleepiness, numbness, hallucinations, insomnia, fatigue, depression, itching, vomiting, tremor, tachycardia, diarrhea, pallor, rashes, hives, ataxia, and edema. Fourth example, since this unique study was small and not yet peer-reviewed, we cannot fairly draw any conclusions as to if or how Roundup Ready soy influences offspring. From what we do know about GM soy, however, there are several ways in which it might influence the health of the next generation. The information contained in the source text is seldom presented in a neutral, detached, flat way. As they communicate knowledge to the readers, authors also express their attitudes not only toward their readers, but also toward the contents and ideas they want to communicate. Sometimes they want to emphasize a point, as in examples 1 and 2, whereas at other times they need to be cautious about what they're saying, as in example 3. In some other cases, such as example 4, we find a complex combination of caution and emphasis. In these four examples, we find model expressions that reflect the author's attitude of emphasis or caution towards the readers and the contents. Modality is one of the main ways of expressing emphasis and caution. It is a gradable phenomenon through which we can express different degrees of certainty and obligation. Wording. When crafting the target text, we must pay attention not only to the content that we communicate, but also to the preferred expression used to communicate it, also referred to as phraseology or prefabricated expressions. In medical genres, there are preferred ways of saying things. Have a look at the following expressions taken from a patient information leaflet. Keep this leaflet. You may need to read it again. If you have further questions, please ask your doctor or your pharmacist. Keep all medicines out of reach of children. Do not exceed stated dose. The phraseology of some parts of the summary of product characteristics is also highly conventionalized. Collocations. Collocations, or preferred combination of words, are equally important when crafting the text. For example, in biomedical abstracts published in English, the adverb postoperatively tends to appear on the one hand with the noun patients, and on the other hand with the verbs explore, diagnose, assess, perform, analyze, administer, interview, and premedicate in sentences, such as blood samples drawn from 44 patients with breast cancer were preoperatively analyzed. A neuropsychological test battery was administered preoperatively. Parathyroid hormone levels were measured preoperatively and 30 minutes postoperatively. Thus, the lexical combination of postoperatively plus patient plus one of the above-mentioned verbs constitutes a preferred way of wording, mainly in passive sentences, in research genres written in English. To make the target text fully adequate and acceptable, we must discover collocational patterns in our target language. This can be done intuitively after many years of conscious practice or by means of automatic lexical analyzers, such as wordsmith tools. Finally, medical writers have a repertoire of prefabricated expressions that they use for different rhetorical purposes, such as supporting their interests, referring to previous research without bothering to review and summarize it, validating their results, acknowledging help from colleagues, and so forth. Titling. We all know that titles and subtitles are used to give readers an idea of what is to follow, so that after glancing at the title, they have a good idea of whether they want to read on or not. Titles, thus, save the reader's time if they are not interested, but if they are, help to prepare them mentally for what they are about to read. They may already, at this stage, have certain expectations about possible arguments, structure, terminology, and so forth. When drafting the title of the target text, we should take into account two aspects: the overall communicative purpose of the title and its structure. There are two kinds of titles as far as communicative purpose is concerned: indicative and informative. Indicative titles are those which tell us what a paper is about. For example, mouse models of diabetic nephropathy. Informative titles are those which sum up in one sentence the main message of the paper. For example, biliverdin therapy protects rat livers from ischemia and reperfusion injury. As far as the structure of titles is concerned, there are three types: single continuous title, a title with subordinate terms following a colon, or a title and a subtitle. A single continuous title, for example, transplants of umbilical cord or bone marrow from unrelated donors in adults with acute leukemia. A title with a subordinate term following a colon, for example, differentiation of mesenchymal stem cells towards a nucleus pulposus-like phenotype in vitro, implications for cell-based transportation therapy. Or a title and a subtitle, for example, a carboxypeptidase inhibitor from the tick Rhipicephalus bursa, isolation, cDNA cloning, recombinant expression, and characterization. It may seem strange that titling is the last thing we are considering, when the title of a text always appears at the very beginning. The reason for this is that it is often a waste of time to write the title before you write the body of your target text, because frequently what you chose in advance will turn out to be inappropriate.